Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and hopefully I've got these audio issues a little more resolved. I've had people complain about them, and I've tried to work on it, but people forget that a lot of times I film my videos several days ahead of time. Like right now, some of these videos aren't going to be coming out for 2 or 3 days until after I record them, so sometimes it's taking a while with a new room, in a room with hardwood floor and everything to get the audio right, and I think I've got it a little bit better. Hopefully this works out, but today I want to chat with you guys about interesting article with a bunch of resources in it that Menno Henselman, I think that's how you say his name, put out. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this because I thought this was interesting and this was good timing because I noticed something. I've been doing really high protein lately because of the satiety, and I talk about that, the muscle preservation, the satiety, everything else, and there being amount of data out there when you are trying to lose body fat. But I have noticed that the appetite suppressing effects have been wearing off, and that's one reason I'm switching over, which I told you guys the other day. I'm switching over into doing more fasting, and I'm actually just adding more fiber and other stuff to my diet most days, unless I want to go out and be social. So I am using actually kind of a variation of Birkin's type of fasting that Martin Birkin does, and it's working pretty good. Like I said, I'm over 40 pounds deep into my cut. I'm going to probably drop another 20 pounds of body fat and try to maintain muscle and strength, and then rebuild from there. So in the case of this, I've noticed that, and so I did notice a couple things. I saw in the article that that is one of the problems, is that high protein diets, when you follow them for a long time, a longer period of time, that over time the satiety benefits that you get from them seem to wear off over time. They seem to wear off over time, which is interesting because that's something I've noticed even, and I'm talking large amounts because I'm eating up to 400 grams of protein a day, or that's what I've been eating, and eventually you no longer get satiety from that. People are like, what do you mean? So yeah, I'm talking like 3 pounds of chicken. 3 pounds of chicken every day, plus either Greek yogurt, protein shake, stuff like that, in addition to my other foods. And the thing that's noted in there is he talks a lot more about that. That's saying, hey, beyond your initial needs, the satiety isn't there. In other words, there is strong data showing that up to a certain threshold, protein actually has a really high satiety, right? Has a really high satiety. And you're going to tend to want to avoid other foods that aren't high protein foods, or you're going to, it works pretty well, is that it seems to balance out your appetite to some extent. And it's because we as humans, we do need a certain amount of protein. And contrary to what many vegans and other people do say, it isn't always as easy to get the proteins that you want, or that you need for all your functions, particularly if you're really physically active. Particularly if you're physically active. It's not as easy to get them as you think. And so we actually have a need, and our body has a drive to find higher protein foods and kind of eschew other stuff until we've reached kind of our protein threshold, at least for the day or for a meal or over a period of time. Because people need to remember, a lot of the higher protein foods you're consuming, you're still breaking them down and using them for fuel many hours after you eat them. But we don't have a storage for protein in our body other than our muscle tissue. So we do tend to seek out protein up to a certain threshold. And so it seems to have an appetite suppressing effect up to a certain point on things like your carb and fat intake. But once you've reached that threshold, which actually isn't, for most of us who lift, we probably reach that daily threshold within our first meal or two of the day. Like we're done. We've reached it really easily. For a lot of us, we reach that threshold in our first sitting. Our breakfast. I mean, I know I do. The sort of thresholds they're looking at there. We're talking stuff like your first 60 or 70 grams a day. Well, it's nothing for me to eat 60 or 70 grams of protein at breakfast. That's pretty normal. That's typical for me. So when you look at that, it's interesting that it doesn't seem to exist beyond that. Instead, what he's saying is that look at the higher satiety foods, because it's not that carbs, fat, protein, things like that have a high satiety. Stop looking at it in terms of macros for satiety and start looking at food choices. Look at the individual foods. Look at the research on how different foods are filling. Look at their fiber content. Look at the food volume, right? Because he pointed out that it's noted that if you fluff up a bunch of casein and make a really fluffy version of casein versus drinking a watery whey shake, it tends to fill you up more with the exact same calories and protein. Eating watermelon with the exact same amount of sugar and carbs in it that a soda has or orange juice has is going to be a lot more filling due to the food volume, due to the fiber, all sorts of other stuff going on. Start looking at the research on satiety on potatoes. That's another good one. Potatoes have a super high satiety. Beans, vegetables, as he pointed out, most fruits. And I think that he ended the article well with that point of saying, look, if you want to not destroy your budget, and there's a good point there. Eating 400 grams of protein a day does get expensive. It does get a lot more expensive, and I'm always having to find chicken on sale, buy it bulk, not always eat the protein sources I would prefer because I don't want to spend beyond a certain threshold. Like I personally try not to spend more than about $400 a month on groceries for me personally. That's kind of where I put my grocery budget at. And so when you're consuming 400 grams of protein a day, that doesn't always give you the best food choices. But if you're willing to cut that down, I mean, that considerably changes what you have available. And I thought that was interesting, that point was made there that as far as the budget and everything goes. It's going to be easier on your budget. You'll probably get a more varied nutrient diversity, focusing on things like he said, potatoes, beans, vegetables, most fruits. And I think there's some truth to that. And actually, I had been doing a little more potatoes the last few days myself because I know that they have a great satiety factor. I like them. So potatoes, beans, yeah, definitely. Vegetables. And that's what I had been doing with the fasting. It wasn't just the protein. It's like I would always break my fast lately on chicken and broccoli. Right, so I'm getting those vegetables in. I'm getting a pretty good amount of broccoli with breakfast every day, and I think that was probably a factor in the satiety I was getting and attributing it more to the protein. So there's something to be said for that. And again, a good article. It's a pretty good article, and you guys should check it out. I'll link it in the comments down below. I don't ever link stuff like this in the descriptions because I've gotten in trouble. YouTube doesn't like it for some reason. People have reported me for it, and I've gotten strikes for even linking scientific studies. So, people always say, why don't you make more studies in the description? Because I don't want to lose my YouTube account. YouTube has given me strikes for it. They don't like me personally linking studies. They don't like me linking studies in my description. I've gotten strikes for it before. I got them lifted, but still, it's the hassle of it. It's not worth it to me. So, I'll link this down in the comments section, his article. And it's something for us to think about, and it's something to utilize, and it's what I'm going to be messing more with lately, because it wasn't just about that. It was also when you start looking at it, even Eric Helms, who did his research on this, is saying actually very, very few people, more than about a little over 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, very few people even see additional muscle preservation beyond that. So when you start looking at the data he showed that some people did, but they were the outliers in his study, in his doctoral work. So when we start looking at it from that perspective, if we're not going to get more satiety beyond a certain threshold, and we're not going to get better muscle preservation, I don't know, maybe it's not ideal. And this is one of these cases of I've been doing something and it has worked up to a certain point, trying to be scientific, but as we start digging deeper into the research, and I think this came at a good time for me, some of this write-up, and just looking at the different studies, analyzing it, I can use this for my own benefit. Because a lot of people point out, there's like, Jason, well, your training knowledge is awesome, but you suck at getting lean. Well, so that's why I've been listening more to evidence-based people who don't suck at getting lean. That's why I've been looking a lot more at what Birkin says. I'm even looking at what Menno says. I'm looking at what Dr. Mike says. I'm looking at what Dr. Helms says. I've been looking at what my bro Nico Elo says. Simply because that hasn't historically always been my wheelhouse. So I do need to experiment with other things. And if I can use a strategy to get lean, considering I have an insane appetite. I have a history on YouTube of being above 20% body fat the majority of the time. I have a voracious appetite. I am the person who needs the most strategies to get lean, right? And so if I can use some of these strategies, if they end up working for me, you know that they're really good. We know that they're viable strategies at that point. So that's kind of like anyone who can get the tiny, skinny hard gainer who started at 130 pounds up to 200 pounds and strong. their training knowledge is probably pretty good. And their knowledge on how to get muscle and strength on someone is good, because you have someone who's on the far end of the spectrum in terms of getting those results, the difficulty. So I think the same could be said when it comes to some of these cutting strategies. So yeah, I'm definitely going to look at a lot more stuff like this. I thought the article was really interesting. And it's stuff I've already realized I need to start applying to myself, and I've started shifting in that direction. But this article really hammered it home for me. So it was good timing for it to get linked in my social media. And yeah, so you guys should check it out, do the reading. Let me know what you guys think about it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.